The first thing folks remembered was the music, not the gun, not the threat, but the fiddle crying beneath the lantern light while boots scraped the saloon floor. And in the middle of it all he stood tall as a pine against a storm, hat tipped low, spurs chiming soft, and when the outlaw at the door raised his rifle and swore he would spill blood before the night was through, the cowboy only smiled slow and easy and said, "You can shoot me, but first, let me finish this dance." The town of Red Hollow had seen dust storms mean enough to skin a steer and gamblers, crooked enough to steal the shoes off a preacher. Yet it had never seen a man so calm with death staring down his chest. His name was Cole Merrick, trail rider, bronc breaker, a drifter with a past stitched tighter than the seams on his saddle. And as he turned back to the woman in the blue dress, his hand steady at her waist, the room held its breath like the desert waiting on rain. Her name was Lila Rose, his schoolteacher by daylight, firelight dreamer by night, and she had never been held so close by a man who smelled of leather and sage and danger. She felt the tremor in his heartbeat, but not fear. No, it was something else, something like farewell mixed with promise, and though the rifle barrel glinted from across the floor, she kept her boots moving in time with his, trusting the strange courage in his dark eyes. The outlaw blocking the batwing doors was known as Wade Cutter, a bounty hunter turned bitter when the gold ran dry. His coat was black, his beard rough, and his patience thinner than a last dollar. He had ridden 3 days to find Cole, chasing rumors across mesas and riverbeds, claiming there was a price on the cowboy's head back in Amarillo, claiming justice would be served in Lead, and yet he did not pull the trigger, not while the fiddle kept playing and the crowd stood frozen between fear and wonder. Cole guided Lila through a slow turn, boots sliding smooth, and whispered low enough that only she could hear, "I never meant for this trouble to follow me here, but I swear on every star above this cursed desert, I will not let him touch you." His voice was steady as a fence post set deep in rock, and Lila felt tears threaten, though she would not let them fall, because she knew now the stories about Cole were true. He was not running from the law. He was running from a mistake soaked in someone else's greed. Months before, in a border town thick with card sharks and whiskey fumes, Cole had refused to hand over a rancher's daughter to men who called themselves lawmen, but carried cruelty in their smiles. There had been a fight, fists first, then guns, and when the smoke cleared, one man lay wounded and the others swore revenge. Wade Cutter among them, pride bruised worse than bone. And since that night Cole had ridden alone, carrying the weight of honor like a saddle he could not shrug off. Back in the saloon the piano player faltered, sweat rolling down his temple, unsure whether to stop or play faster, and old Sheriff Boone stood near the bar with his hand hovering over his holster, knowing one wrong twitch could start a slaughter. Yet something in Cole's stance held him still. The cowboy was not posturing, not begging. He was claiming a final sliver of peace before violence tore it apart, and the townsfolk began to understand they were witnessing more than a standoff. They were seeing a man choose dignity over panic. As the dance drew toward its final turn, Cole dipped Lila gentle as sunrise, her blue skirt brushing the dusty floor, and the room seemed to spin around them like a slow prairie wind. Then he brought her upright and pressed his forehead to hers for the briefest heartbeat. When he stepped away at last, he did so without haste, turning to face Wade Cutter square on, hands loose at his sides, the music fading into a hush so deep a body could hear the crackle of lantern wicks. And with that same easy half-smile he spoke again. "Go on then, I am finished dancing." And the next breath in Red Hollow tasted of gunpowder and fate. The silence after his words hung heavier than a thundercloud over dry prairie, and for a long breath nobody moved, not Cole, not Wade Cutter, not even the flies buzzing lazy near the whiskey bottles. The lantern flames trembled like they too feared what was coming, and Cole stood square in the middle of Red Hollow's saloon floor, shoulders relaxed, chin lifted, eyes fixed steady on the man who had ridden 3 hard days to kill him. Wade's rifle remained trained on Cole's chest, yet his finger did not tighten. There was anger in him, sure enough, but also something unsettled by the calm he faced. Most men begged or bolted or reached too fast for iron. Cole did none of that. He simply waited like a stone in a river, letting the current decide its own fury. And Wade spat to the side, boots creaking as he stepped forward, saying loud enough for all to hear that a dance did not wash away blood-owed in Amarillo. Lila stood near the edge of the floor now, fingers knotted tight in her skirt, heart hammering fierce. She knew nothing of Amarillo, except what rumors carried on wind. But she knew the man before her was no murderer. She had seen the way he fixed a broken fence for old Mrs. Dalton without being asked, the way he read aloud to the children who struggled, and the thought of him falling to a bullet in her town made her spine straighten despite fear. Sheriff Boone finally stepped from the bar's shadow, boots heavy against the planks, voice rough as gravel, saying that Red Hollow settled disputes under its own sky, not by the whispers of distant men. He warned Wade plain that firing inside town limits would bring the whole weight of the badge upon him. Yet, even as he spoke, Boone's eyes flicked to Cole, searching for some sign, some plea, but the cowboy offered none. Cole broke the silence himself, voice even and clear, telling Wade that the man wounded in Amarillo still breathed, that no innocent blood stained his hands, that the only crime he claimed was standing between a frightened girl and men who mistook power for right. His words rolled slow and steady, like wagon wheels over dirt, and for a flicker of a moment, doubt crossed Wade's hardened face. Wade answered that the wounded man was his brother, that pride and pain rode him harder than any law, and that a brother's wound demanded reckoning whether death had come or not. His jaw clenched tight, eyes sharp with years of rough living, and he lowered the rifle just a hair, not in mercy but in thought. The saloon crowd, shifting restless as wind through tall grass. Lila found her courage then, stepping forward though her knees trembled. She spoke of justice not as revenge but as truth weighed fair. She said, if a man defends the helpless, he stands on higher ground than those who bully in the name of law. Her voice was soft, yet carried through the room, and even the piano player lifted his head as if hearing a sermon meant for him alone. The moment stretched thin as wire. Cole's hand hovered near his holster now, not drawing, only ready. Wade's rifle wavered between anger and uncertainty. Sheriff Boone's thumb brushed the hammer of his revolver, and outside a gust of desert wind shoved against the batwing doors, making them groan like old ghosts. Then Wade took one more step into the lantern glow, lowering the rifle fully at last, but reaching instead for the pistol at his hip, and every soul in Red Hollow knew the next heartbeat would split the night wide open. Wade's hand moved fast, but not faster than fear. Not faster than pride that had burned too long in a lonely saddle. His pistol cleared leather with a hiss, and in that same heartbeat Cole's draw came smooth as silk sliding from a lady's glove. 2 flashes split the lantern light, 2 reports cracked like dry branches in winter, and the smell of powder rolled thick across the saloon floor. Lila screamed though she did not know which man had fallen. Chairs toppled, boots scrambled, and Sheriff Boone fired once into the ceiling to still the panic. Splinters raining down like hard desert hail. When the smoke thinned, it showed Cole still standing, arm extended, steady, and Wade staggered back against a table, his pistol clattering to the planks, a dark bloom spreading across his shoulder rather than his heart. Cole had aimed true but low. He had chosen flesh over fatal, and as Wade slid down the table leg with a grimace, more wounded in spirit than body, the room understood what had happened. This was not a kill shot. It was a line drawn in dust, a lesson fired clean, and Cole stepped forward slow, revolver still trained but voice calm, telling Wade that debt was paid in pain and spared in mercy. Sheriff Boone kicked Wade's pistol aside and knelt to bind the wound, muttering that foolish pride made poor company for a long ride, while townsfolk gathered in a wary circle, some whispering that Cole could have ended it clean, others nodding quiet respect at the restraint shown under threat. And Lila pushed through them all until she stood beside the cowboy once more, eyes shining with relief and something deeper. Wade looked up at Cole through clenched teeth, anger drained by blood and dawning truth. He asked why he had been spared, why mercy was offered where vengeance was expected, and Cole answered plain that he would not become the very thing he had stood against in Amarillo. That justice without conscience was nothing more than dressed-up cruelty, and his words settled heavier than any bullet. As the first pale stripe of dawn crept through the saloon windows, painting the floorboards gold, Wade gave a slow nod, not quite apology, not yet forgiveness, but the beginning of something softer than hate. He swore the chase was done, that he would tell his brother the truth of the night in Amarillo, and that some debts were better buried than collected. Sheriff Boone helped him to his feet with a grunt, and promised to see him patched proper before sending him on his way. The townsfolk drifted back to their corners, the piano player testing a timid chord, the fiddle picking up a gentle strain as if unsure whether joy was permitted after gunsmoke, and Cole finally let his revolver rest back in its holster. shoulders easing though his eyes still carried the weight of roads traveled alone. Lila stepped close, fingers brushing his hand, asking quiet what he would do now that the past had stopped chasing. Cole looked out through the battering doors at a horizon washed clean by morning light, the desert stretching wide and forgiving, and he tipped his hat to Lila with that same half-smile that had faced down a rifle, saying maybe a man did not need to run once truth had stood its ground. He offered his hand not for a dance stolen from danger but for one begun in peace, and as the fiddle found a hopeful tune and the sun rose over Red Hollow, the cowboy who had dared to finish his dance chose not the road alone but the promise.